What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Quarters Podcast. Today, the day has finally come. We're going to be talking the 2025 NFL Draft quarterbacks. Our top 10 initial list here. Randy's already sweating because he's got to put out a list this early, but that's all right. And we're going to be talking about quarterbacks to shape the league. Giant question mark. I'm not sure there. We're going to be doing rankings. We're going to be talking their strengths, weaknesses, kind of project their ceilings as well. Who's our QB1? Who's someone that's getting kind of overhyped right now? And then maybe some sleepers out there. Christian always falls in love with some sleepers at the quarterback position. So he'll be talking about some of his favorite ones on this episode of the Quarters Podcast. All right. Before we get into our initial list here, one thing I will say is I don't know if any of these guys are going to be good. I'd be honest with you, it is a down class in the quarterback class. None of it moves the needle for me when you're watching these guys. So with a grain of salt, I think it's hey, yeah, we like some of these guys. When you think of what we see on tape, maybe production wise, we like them. Analytics, maybe sometimes it could kind of pop off there. But overall, this is a down class. This is a class that has a ton of question marks, even at the top. So when we're talking 10 through 6, we're talking kind of bottom of the barrel guys sometimes. There's always going to be guys that pop off. We see that, Brock Purdy types. But just so you're aware, if you're just now kind of getting into the 25 quarterback class, giant question marks throughout. Now, we're going to kind of just run through our 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. It's kind of highlight some guys that we're going to talk about. Can't talk about every single individual one. We definitely want to spend a little bit more time on the top guys. But we'll start at 10. So my 10 is Dillon Gabriel, Oregon quarterback. Randy's got Kyle McCord there at 10. And then Christian's got Cam Miller at 10 as well. And then when we go to 9, when we're looking at 9, I got Cam Miller there, Riley Leonard for Randy, and then Riley Leonard also for Christian. So we're going to start the show off with Riley Leonard. Obviously, been playing at Notre Dame, made the national championship game. Questions about how good of a quarterback he is. He's an athlete, though. We've seen that throughout his run there, especially at Notre Dame. But Randy, what can we tell us about Riley Leonard? Why do you have him at 9? What do you see from him?
Well, we've seen a lot of football from him, but I do think he truly just continued to develop. And this last year at Notre Dame, I think he put all the tools together that he could have. I do think he's going to get drafted and be a quality backup for the NFL. That's kind of how I have it. But, like you said, good athlete. I think his arm strength is there. It's above a lot of guys in this class, to be honest with you. And mechanically, he's pretty sound, sitting in the pocket and making some good decisions are some of his strong suits. But, some of the placement, some of the processing still isn't fully there, especially at the amount of years he's played here and what you think he should have developed as. It's just not there all the way. So I think he is a good quarterback with a good amount of upside. I think he gives you a safe floor. But, at 9 in this class, it's just not elite talent, but a good college quarterback for sure.
Yeah, he's interesting because I think he was one that a lot of people picked as this kid could take a big jump. We saw flashes at Duke, and then he got hurt that final year. And so we never really knew if he had the capability of, developing the deep ball. I think that's been one of his main problems is everything that he throws is short to intermediate, and those passes can be fairly accurate. I think there's still some placement issues in the intermediate stuff, but really that deep ball, it was rough at Duke. We would see it in the big games. He would try to throw the ball downfield. It wouldn't work. And so a lot of times his legs bailed him out. I think his legs also inflate his ranking because he's going to be a good athlete. He's going to, like Randy said, he's played a lot of football. So I think he is valuable to a team. It's just, can he continue taking those next steps? Can he refine? He's got good feet in the pocket. I think he resets really well as he's going through progressions. But a lot of what he's doing is one read and taking off. And I think part of that is that's kind of what he's coached to do because that's such an asset. The challenging part is deciphering, can he actually sit back there and go through progressions? I think the film suggests that that's not the case. I think if he could do that, I think a lot of NFL or even college teams would have preferred him to do that instead of being a one read and go. But he's a fun quarterback with tools. I think that's the main thing. I'd rather bet on a kid like Riley Leonard over, honestly, Kevin, no offense, but like I'd rather bet on Riley Leonard over Dylan Gabriel, which might sound crazy in a few years because Dylan Gabriel is getting a ton of hype right now, and I get it, but it's just I'd rather take the 6'3", 210-pound kid with actual workable things than the 5'4", 7-year player in college. So I think he's more a ball of clay, which is what NFL teams are going to like. So.
Randy, we're gonna go.
Yeah, I just fight back on the ball because again, I was definitely someone that thought there'd be a big jump coming from Duke. I thought there'd be a lot more to happen, but I started with the ball of clay simply, as brought up, the processing, throw with anticipation, making throws all over the field. It just isn't there yet. And when we're saying that from a guy that's played this much, started this many games, that's a problem for me, at least in the ball of clay formality of it, just because there's so much, like that's the stuff that should be cleaned up already. And then, processing at the NFL level, obviously, I would not be expecting from a college quarterback. So, but he's honestly processing at like a lower Power 5 capacity right now, especially with any kind of real defense against him.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I think that's a fair assessment, honestly. I mean, really, like 43 games, that's, you look at Shedeur Sanders, who we'll talk about later, who, has his fair share of problems still, and like he blows past that 43 game mark. I think he played, 27 or 28 when he was at Jackson State. So, I do agree. I think the 7 games as a freshman, like we kind of knew what he was. He was a former basketball player, which is a pretty critical piece of his evaluation. I think he started playing football fairly late, and he started playing quarterback really late. And then he only got those 7 games at Duke as a junior. So it's like, I feel like there's still something there. Once again, he's my QB9 though. It's like, I'm not totally betting on it. But I wouldn't be shocked if like Riley Leonard is starting a spot start game in 3 years and he goes out and balls out, and then the fantasy football community goes crazy over him,
Yeah. I know you're not pushing back on it by any means, because obviously he's the same spot as you. But yeah, I definitely think he's going to be a quality NFL back. I think he could easily come in and win games. I think he could easily come in and make question marks for an organization. But I just don't think he's going to be the second quarterback drafted for a team like Kirk Cousins and take over.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever noticed when someone says no offense, it really does mean offense? Like, I feel like that's what happened there.
So
I
said that, and Randy has him way higher, so it should have been no offense for Randy because and I'll be candid. I have Riley Leonard and Dylan Gabriel and Cam Miller tied, same exact grade right now. So the reason Dylan Gabriel is not on my list is because I'm betting on Leonard and Cam Miller. So I did want to decipher that. I had some jurisdiction. Normally I stick to the grades, but when the grades are tied, you know what? We're just leaving off the short king out in Oregon. And
that's fine. I think for me, the reason why, when I didn't have Riley Leonard on my board is his mechanics probably scares me the most about him. Like, I think it affects his accuracy, and I think Dylan at least can get out there and make serviceable throws. Like, he's a 10 for me. So I'm not like here. I mean, I know he throws over 70 miles per hour apparently, but I think that he can play within an offense. I mean, they were talking about him having a better arm than Tua, though. I think at the Senior Bowl, I heard Todd McShay say that a couple times, and I don't know about that. But again, if he can find an offense where he gets the ball out quick, Gabriel could probably do that. Now we're going to talk about Gabriel in a little while. Cam Miller, I'll just talk about him really quickly, just because he's at 9 for me. And he's at 10 for Christian. He's off the board for Randy. Cam Miller looked pretty good this year for North Dakota State. I think we hear North Dakota State, we get a little nervous because of Trey Lance. But he started 16 games this year. 258 for 351. Over 3,000 yards passing, 33 touchdowns, but also had over 600 yards rushing. Really kind of was their guy, obviously, in that offense. And he showed out pretty good at the Senior Bowl. Like, not perfect. And again, Senior Bowl's tough to gauge, like, what do these guys are. But I think the one thing with him, even though he's a little shorter than Leonard Wright, standing there, I think did he measure in 6 foot? I think 6-foot-ish, 6'1".
Yeah,
Yeah.
6 and 7/8.
Okay. So yeah,
about
that,
6'1".
oh man, I tell my wife all the time I'm 6'1" then. So yeah, if you're looking at that, like, I think with Miller, I think, arm strength's average. So I look at him like a West Coast type of quarterback, get the ball out quick, make positive decision, and he can do that. I think that his deep ball is a little inaccurate. Like, it's inconsistent at times, but in the pocket, I think his athleticism allows him to evade pressure. I think extend plays. He'd be a fun backup quarterback. And I think he's getting a little bit buzz like that now. I still think he's a day 3 undrafted type kid, but if he makes a roster, I do think that his ability to kind of escape, his ability to be an athlete, and he can just make quick decisions, get the ball out, and be smart with an offense. I like that.
Yeah, he was a fun study. I think that North Dakota State team I think they won the championship again, and so in a few of those playoff games, like, we saw him really. I mean, his athleticism popped quite a bit against that level of competition. I don't think when we put him on the field against NFL athletes, it's going to be anything really to write home about. He does, he reminds me of the perfect backup where if you need him to come in and execute an offense, I think he can do that, which is why he's down here at 10. I don't think you have any question marks about what he's giving you. I will say, like, he was changing some arm angles a little bit at the Senior Bowl to get some throws out to the flat and stuff. And that's fun, and it's fun stuff. But really, I think the experience level, the ability to process the field, especially over the middle of the field, I kind of highlighted when I was watching his film. It's like really good. And we don't always see that, but you have to see that from a North Dakota State quarterback for them to make a top 10 list. Unfortunately, we've been burnt by these kids before. So, I'm not gonna, I almost wanted to I put a minus on the modifier because he played at North Dakota State. So, which I don't think I used to do. Also, you mentioned Trey Lance. Shout out his brother, who just balled out as a wide receiver for North Dakota State this year. Yeah. It was fun to watch. I was watching Cam Miller. I was like, oh man, am I going to get sucked into another Lance?
Nope,
here?
I will not.
I'm not going to do it. Well, this one plays wide receiver at least. So at least it'd be, more Christian Watson than Trey Lance. But, Cam Miller, he is what he is. I think that's the perfect way to sum it up.
Yeah, I do think, like you said, perfect backup, kind of the Tyson Bagent mold. Just gives you a lot of exciting plays, isn't going to make mistakes, plays within the system, coachable, good locker room guy. I think you'll get everything you want at this kind of draft pick from Cam Miller. And, what you saw from the bigger games like Colorado, he played perfect within the system, made throws. There's a lot of very quick reads, but, he didn't make mistakes, really.
Yeah. That's a good comp. I like that comp a lot. He's that plucky backup that everybody loves, right? Yeah. Like, he's
keep the flow.
You get that opportunity, and then he gets in there and starts a couple games like, what the hell is going on here? But if he just gets in there and just kind of he dials it up. So then at 8, we got Tyler Shuck for me. That's the high there. Curtis Rourke for Randy, and then Kyle McCord for Christian there. I'll talk about Tyler Shuck real quick since I'm the high guy there. He was a top 100 recruit in class of 2018. So when we're talking old, yes, we are talking him. He's 7-year college player there. But the reason why I have him aside, this one's will be simple because we don't want to talk about a bunch of these guys that long. His arm strength. Like, he's got a very, very solid arm. Not a ton of wasted movement. Gets the ball out fairly quickly, pretty good velocity, and he can definitely has varying arm angles, kind of like what Christian talked about as well. I'm just gonna say maturity because he's been in the damn college for so long. But I mean, he can come out there, and I think that he is a serviceable backup that can run a offense, right? Like, we're not asking him to do a ton. I do think seeing him play in so many different systems is something that, hey, he's definitely done it. So he can do that at the NFL level too. At Louisville, he was pretty good this year for Louisville. Like, when you watched him out there in Louisville, overperformed, I think I had the under on them. It was close. But I give him credit because he does have the arm. And when you're looking at, like, hey, will a team like him as a backup? I think they will because of that arm talent there. He's a less risk than a Cam Miller type, in my opinion. Probably less risk than Dylan Gabriel to an extent, depending on value and where you have to draft them at, and just because of that arm talent. So nothing pretty here. I just think that he has a good arm, good enough arm to play in NFL.
Well, he can see over the line of scrimmage, which I think is the main point.
I
will also say Tyler Shuck, 42 games played over his 7-year career, which is about what Riley Leonard was at in 4 years. I think durability is certainly a concern. He had a ton of injuries throughout his career, but the arm is huge. And I know scouts are kind of buzzing about it. There's talk that he might push for a day 2 draft selection, which I think is a little crazy. But also like Davis Mills and Tanner McKee and those types of guys get pushed in. When you have a guy that has been in a few different systems, but also has been in college football since, well before COVID, I think it is an acquisition to have that type of player as your backup. So high value backup for sure.
That's wild. Man didn't even know what COVID was when he got in college football, and now he's getting drafted in 2025.
Insane.
He's my 12 for what it's worth. So
okay. All right, yeah, I'm a little higher on him. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. All right, at 7, we got Will Howard. So I have Will Howard at 7. Randy's got Dylan Gabriel, and then Curtis Work for Christian there. Randy, defend your man. Defend Dylan Gabriel here from all this hatred that Christian Williams has been throwing at him.
The little stuff is kind of crazy. But I do think, obviously, production-wise, from Dylan Gabriel, we saw a lot of good things. Another older prospect, Christian keeps saying he's really short, and he kind of is, but we've had a lot of quarterbacks about this size kind of make some plays, so it's not the worst thing in the world. I do think he's a good athlete, nothing great by any means. In the right system, Kevin's already kind of touched on this. If you can get him in a system where, he's getting the ball out, he's making quick reads and everything, like an Oregon offense, he's a good quarterback. He could win a lot of games. However, I don't really see that in the NFL besides, coming in as the Spurs a backup and giving half a playbook. So that's kind of the issue for me. But in terms of just him and his arm strength, not really there, but placement, processing, somewhat of the off-platform, anticipation throws, good mechanics. It's just, and decision-making when he doesn't have to make a ton of decisions. He can do some pre-snap stuff. I think he's got a lot of good qualities there, but I do have, a modifier of minus for size and age in an easy college system. It's just how it is. Yeah, he's 7 in this quarterback class. Like, that's kind of the issue. I do have him actually tied, grade-wise exactly with Curtis Rourke. It's just film-wise, he is 1 point better.
I think all that's fair. I think he's one of the best processors in the class. As many shots as I've taken at him, I think he does process information well. He's 3/8 taller than Bryce Young, and Bryce Young has to jump to throw the ball. And I don't think his processing or playmaking ability is as good as what Bryce Young was, obviously, coming out. And we've kind of learned that Bryce Young probably shouldn't have been that number 1 overall pick, even though he bounced back and he's getting better. I think it will take an adjustment for Dylan Gabriel as he gets to the NFL level. But I do think he throws with good anticipation. He's pretty buttoned up mechanically. His arm is stronger than Josh Allen, according to the Senior Bowl miles per hour reads on all of that stuff. So, which is not true, by the way.
I've had someone throw at me that just bullets it from 5 yards. Great. I really don't care about that. Yeah. My fingers still hurt.
The other thing with Dylan, over 17,000 career passing yards in college football. So from a production standpoint, I mean, he definitely had that. And he understands coverages pretty well too. I thought he got better obviously because that experience. When you see him, like, he understands when to throw deep, when not to. I thought he layered the ball really well this year for Oregon. And that last game was a tough one because Ohio State was just a buzzsaw. But he also, I think, has some underrated athleticism too. I like Dylan Gabriel. It's hard. Like, I still have him at 10. I actually put him on my board because I'm not a severe hater like Christian is. I think because you have that production there and it's there. It's just hard. with all these guys, it's like, all right, who's going to draft him as their backup? But with Dylan, it's like, all right, who's going to really draft this guy? Like, where's that backup coming from? Like, who envisions him as being that guy that can kind of be that guy? I think his draft projection's around 5 or 6 right now, round 5 or 6. I see that. I don't know kind of where he's going to go. I think that's the big question mark there. All right, let's go to Christian. Curtis Work, that's your guy. Why?
Good film. Good film on a torn ACL. I think that's pretty critical. And also the torn ACL is a reason to not like him because, we're looking at an extended recovery, I believe. I think he ended up having surgery right after the season. But Rourke, to me, if you go back to his OU film even, he's a really good placer of the football. I think you just talked about layering the football. I think he does a really good job of that. This Indiana offense, I think, actually hampered him. Obviously, the level of competition increased from OU, but I think OU was actually doing more translatable stuff than what Indiana did. They ran just so many RPOs. I think a lot of that stuff was quick read stuff. And so I think that kind of made me question if Curtis Rourke can process. But then you go back to the OU film and you're like, okay, I kind of see where this kid to me is, like we've talked about with a lot of these guys, just the perfect backup. I think that he can come in, he can execute an offense. I think he's got adequate arm strength, above average even. I think he can drive the football really to all 3 levels of the field with accuracy. His off-platform stuff is rough, but once again, I'm not sure how much of that is because he played on a torn ACL this year. And so I don't know that we've seen the best of Curtis Rourke yet. I think there were times where he threw with anticipation really well on some timing routes. There's flashes. It's not all there yet. And by no means do I think that Curtis Rourke is going to come be a starter at the NFL level. I actually, I have him as a potential NFL starter grade, but a lot of my backups get that grade designation in our grading scale. So, and really, a lot of that is propped up by he was one of the most productive quarterbacks in college football this year. He was just really, really effective. And a lot of the advanced analytics kind of will like him outside of the fact that he's old and, he has a torn ACL right now. So good player, fine backup. That's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I mean, he's a throwback traditional pocket passer to me. Mm-hmm. He's got basically no movability. He's got a lot of years. Injury history. I'll give him a plus athlete. I know me and Christian have 6.5, and he's not going to test, so that's probably going to stay there. But when it comes to just him throwing, he's got a decent arm, and he makes all the throws you really want. I think mechanics would probably be cleaned up, and same with pocket awareness. But again, like Christian said, coming off the ACL and everything, the pocket awareness, I think this year's film is worse, but it's understandable. I tried not to ding it too much, but he's going to make good decisions. I just don't know if he is a 2025 quarterback.
His nickname is the Maple Missile, so +1 on the scale, actually.
That's sick. Well, there was also a Mapletron that was exciting for half a year, so.
Yeah. Chase Claypool sucks.
I mean, the Maple Missile, I haven't heard that. He plays like he's in molasses, though. So I guess that's part of it. Like, he's back there just, I almost just died. See, Curtis Worker's mom just threw something at me right now. I don't know what the hell that was. But wow. I mean, he is kind of stuck in molasses out there. Like that's the thing. He's got the arm, but it's just, man, I mean, it's hard because when you watched him play last year, now that you know he had a torn ACL, it kind of makes sense of why he was just stuck there. Like,
well, his film reminds me a lot of Davis Mills. Like I think, and Davis Mills had the knee injuries as well. What are you gonna say, Randy?
I feel like coming out, maybe it's just because of that quarterback class and like where Davis went. I felt like Davis Mills had more of a ceiling coming out.
He was a higher touted recruit, and so I feel like we might have felt that way because he was the number 1 overall recruit. Looking back at it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, every time I hear Davis Mills, it does inspire a ton of like good feelings in my stomach. Like, ooh, Davis Mills! Like, I love that guy.
He started
like 3 games.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll go ask DeAndre Hopkins about about Davis Mills. He loves that guy. All right, let's go on to 6 here. So then we get to our top 5. Kyle McCord is my 6. Will Howard Will Howard for both these guys here at 6 too. I'll go first. I'll talk about Kyle McCord. He's my irrational confidence guy. I love me some Kyle McCord. Like, this is where I'm at with him. I think at Syracuse he looked great. 4,779 passing yards. And he looked pretty good at the Shrine Bowl. So he went to the Shrine Bowl and now the Senior Bowl. And they said he did enough. They said, hey, he's done enough to really solidify. They even said a top 125 maybe draft grade in terms of getting in there, and we're seeing where he's going to get drafted at. They said, hey, he looked good on quick outs. He was very accurate. He's experienced. And that's what you see from him. I think the production said, and I think he gets a bad rap from Ohio State fans because honestly, I thought he was good last year for Ohio State. I think he would have won a national title this year with Ohio State. I think that he's better than Will Howard, and I will throw that out there now. Like, I don't care what anybody says. I think that he can come in and lead an offense, and I think that, me and Christian used to like Drew Lock. I don't know if we like Drew Lock anymore, but like, he does remind me like of that irrational guy, like confidence guy, comes in, lead an offense. I think he can rally a team around him. That team loved Kyle McCord. Syracuse this year, like, that coaching staff loved him. I think he can get guys to buy into him as a quarterback. He's still big enough, 6'2" and 5'8" and 224 pounds. He's fine there. Like, I think that he's a backup. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, but I think that he can definitely come in and win some games for you in spot up duty. I really do. I think that he's kind of got that confidence for him, then gets out there.
Yeah, I mean, I do see what you're saying with Kyle McCord. I don't.
You're a hater.
struggle.
You're an Ohio State hater.
I'm not.
You're the
Well,
McCord
I'll
hater
definitely
of the
say
show.
I'll give you some bias there, but like, there's just a lot. I will say he was better this year than he was last year for Ohio State. I think he did improve. I think that's a good quality to show that you improved with less talent around you as well. You circled yourself as a leader of the team, which not every quarterback in this class can do. And, I think there's a lot of good things there. And Christian said the multiple ball of clay. I think this is a better example of it. I do think he's got a lot more potential to show. However, he tweeted that he thought Emeka Egbuka doesn't get the respect that he deserves and he's a better player. His worst season was with Kyle McCord throwing the ball. Just saying. I don't know what that is. I'm just saying.
Yeah, McCord, to me, I mean, I think he's a backup, but the reason I think part of it is I think the shying away from the Ohio State, spotlight is going to be part of evaluations. There's going to be questions about why you transferred to Syracuse. I mean, it definitely helped his stock because I think he was good at Ohio State. I think he was a lot better than people gave him credit for. But I wonder if that, high pressure environment is something that he can't handle. As an NFL backup, that really doesn't matter for what it's worth. So I think from a placement perspective, he got significantly better. I think he layers the football a lot better, or in 2024 than 2023. I think his head was spinning a little bit in 2023. This year, you could see he was calm. I think he knew that he was the guy that was going to execute this offense. I think that was part of it. I think the threat of his job being taken from him, and maybe it's a Ryan Day thing, but I think that impacted his play in 2023. I do still think there's a chance we haven't seen the best of Kyle McCord either. I think from a decision-making standpoint, I think that's my main question with him. He loves to throw interceptions. He just loves it. He's a gunslinger, though. There's a little bit of Baker Mayfield in Kyle McCord. And so going to a team like the Bucs and learning behind Baker, I think could be really good for him. But he's still a little lower on my list, I guess.
Yeah, Baker doesn't shy away from the spotlight.
That's true. But maybe McCord doesn't anymore.
Yeah, he learned.
We'll see.
Maybe he grew.
I do. You said processing. I think mechanically is the leaps and bounds I saw from him this year. I thought it was just, again, not as much as insane wide receiver, running back talent around you, and he made better throws. The reason he's gone is the decision making. That's why they made sure he wasn't there. I don't even know if it's necessarily him shying away from the spotlight. I was kind of going into that more of the joke of it, but I think he made too many mistakes on a team that if you don't make mistakes, you can win a national title.
That's a good way to put it. And it's a good transition to Will Howard here because I think if you look at the overall body of work, I think Will Howard and Kyle McCord are very, very similar. I think from an upside perspective, I think from even a size perspective, they're fairly similar. I think Howard is probably more functionally athletic. I think he can make more plays with his legs by a pretty, decent amount. I think from a placement perspective, I like McCord a little bit better. That said, Will Howard took a ton of strides in that playoff run, and that's something that teams are really going to hold on to, I think, and teams are really going to like that. That said, I totally understand Kevin's notion that McCord is better than Howard, and I think Will Howard, he's one of those players where he is what he is. Once again, like he can give you a spot start here and there. I think he can execute an offense when everyone is wide open, and that was something McCord couldn't do in 2023. But I'm curious to see if McCord was at Ohio State last year, do they still win the national title? I think if we get 2024 McCord, I think the answer is yes. That being said, Will Howard did have a much more productive year because of his situation, so that kind of vaults him in our rankings. But from a film perspective, they are very, very close. In fact, I think I have McCord higher when you just take away the production. But all of it matters. We this grading scale takes a pretty holistic approach. So if you're an unproductive player and the film's really good, you have to be really, really good to vault yourself up. I think McCord didn't quite do that. So.
All right, let's jump over the top 5. So here's our top 5 uninspiring rankings that we got right now. That we don't, I don't know, they're okay. So let's get into it. We're gonna start at 5 and then work our way up here on the podcast. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you see the top 5 there. But number 5, I got Jalen Milroe sitting there at 5. So does Randy. So me and Randy are kind of lockstep in there, and then Christian has Quinn Ewers. And then we're going to go 4-5 because we'll just jump into Jalen Milroe with Christian. We'll talk about that. So at 4, I have Quinn Ewers. Randy's got Jackson Dart, so he's kind of a lower guy on him. And then Jalen Milroe for Christian there. But let's just start with Jalen Milroe. So let's just talk about Jalen Milroe, and then we'll move our way up. What are we thinking about him, Christian? So you have him at 4, but again, he could be across the board, athleticism through the roof. Had an up and down Senior Bowl from like day one. It was a train wreck, but got a little bit better. What are you thinking about Jalen?
He's a kid that I've always wanted to bet on because I think the leadership qualities are all there. And so that's a piece of this evaluation that we keep seeing him in first round mocks. And it's like, that sounds insane based on the film from this year and from last year. That's not the type of player he was. He was an incredibly inconsistent, inaccurate player, especially when he had to process the field. He couldn't really process very well this last year. That said, new offense, not that I'm giving him any excuses, but like brand new offense that I think he struggled with, especially early in the season. But that said, the reason we see him in first round mocks is because the leadership stuff is all there, and he has a special trait. The special trait is he is as dynamic with the football in his hands as anyone, by far better than anyone in this class. But also you go back to you're going to see the Lamar stuff. He's a very different runner than Lamar. I think he's got the speed maybe of Lamar, but he's more in the Jalen Hurts run style where it's like he'll kind of plow you over too. And I think there's some power behind his running. Incredible athlete, incredibly small hands. I think that's a piece of this evaluation. We learned that at the Senior Bowl. He's got a very, very strong arm, and I think his deep ball is really good. But as an overall, I don't think he processes the field at all, and the placement's just not there. So I have him at 4, but I think we've kind of alluded to it. That speaks more to this quarterback class. In last year's class, he would have been like QB 10 probably. Or worse, probably, QB 11 or 12. And so I think that's kind of shaping up this class or really highlighting the deficiencies in this class. Yeah. I hope that the leadership stuff comes out. He continues to develop, but Randy has a comp in our grading scale. Why don't you share with the class, Randy, what you think he is?
I hate to see that being called out for your notes. I have it as a bit better Jalen Milroe. Without the injury history.
Bit better who?
Joe Milton. Sorry. See, they're so similar.
Needed to say that name out loud. I just wanted that on record on the podcast here.
I had to. And I think it's fair, especially when you see, week 18, the ceiling of Joe Milton, just great play, when he's out there and allowed to be free and not have to be in a system. And we don't care if we win or lose. Just go have fun, kid. Show your stock. So maybe we trade you for a 5th rounder. Obviously, I think Milroe is better, but I strongly thought he should go back to school. There's a lot in the game, as Christian alluded to, that needs to be cleaned up. Athleticism, off-platform, arm strength, up there with the best of the class, if not the best of the class at all 3 of those. Just phenomenal athlete out there. Placement, I have it as decent. It's mainly because of the deep balls, because probably has the 2nd best deep ball throw in the whole class. But everything else is rough. Like you said, processing is really rough. Anticipation throws are basically non-existent. Mechanics are almost non-existent. And decision-making almost non-existent. And again, the highest of highs, lowest of lows with this guy. So I get why people are going to fall in love with him. And, early on in the season, people were even more in love. He was going top 5 in mocks, but the more we get into more film grades and go a little bit more based in reality, and we get to see things like the Senior Bowl, where I'm not necessarily, Christian, I've said that before, we're not like quarterbacks of the Senior Bowl, this isn't a win or lose with your play on the field, but they make you do things you're not comfortable with. They do that for every player. And for that, he sat in the pocket and missed reads and threw picks.
Cook him.
I mean, he did.
That's right.
If you're going to be honest, if you look at these top 5 guys that we all have, obviously they're all interchangeable. The only one that got worse this year was Jalen Milroe. I could make an argument that every single other one of those guys, even Quinn Ewers, I think Quinn Ewers did enough where you're like, oh, well, I've seen it. Like, I think that he got better than what he did last year of like your profile. Obviously Carson Beck's not on this list, but of these 5 that are here, like I think Milroe I think over the season when he beat Georgia in that first half, that was about as good as we've seen Jalen Milroe. And then ever since that game, he just fell down, and he just didn't progress. And whether that was the scheme or the DeBoer being there and kind of the system, but he was loaded at wide receiver this year. I don't care what anybody says. Jeremy Bernard was amazing. Ryan Williams was a man-child out there as a 17-year-old. I just want to say that just so I could be the first one to ever say that. And I think their offensive line was a little banged up. Their running back room, Justice Haynes struggled. J.M. Miller struggled. So like there was some question marks there, but he just didn't improve. So like that's the thing with me is like he didn't improve. He just feels like a GM getting fired pick. Like if you draft him in the first round, he's a GM getting fired pick.
That's the thing. I don't buy this first round stuff.
No,
and it's still happening. Like I can't. This feels very much like Malik Willis in the first round, where like I think Jalen Milroe is 100% going to be a top 100 pick because of the special trait. That's the main. Get him to make him Lamar Jackson's backup. Like I think that would be really, really great for him, where he can utilize his legs in a system that allows that. But you can't imagine him going to Miami or something like that. I know they love speed there, but like the amount of processing that Tua Tagovailoa has to do, Jalen Milroe would never do that. And so he's got to be drafted as a backup or it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to read our 3 across the board, but then we're going to get in a couple of these guys. Oh, go ahead.
We should probably talk about Quinn Ewers too. Wait. Randy has Quinn Ewers
That's why
at 3. You're right.
3. Yeah, it's all right. I'm just
ruined transitions.
I've done this for a long time, but it's cool. So Jackson Dart is my 3. Quinn Ewers is there with Randy at 3, and then Jackson Dart is Christian's 3. I had Quinn at 4, so that's just someone to say there, and then Christian had Quinn at 5. So, and which is weird because Christian's been kind of a Quinn guy for a while. Like he talks about him early in the season. He's got a few articles out on him there. I like Quinn though. Like I think when I was interchanging my guys, I said, hey, I almost put Quinn at 3 ahead of Jackson Dart as well, which is blasphemous if you're out there on social media right now because you have to like Jackson Dart or you're going to get shot. Like that's really where you're at right now in this draft process. But Randy, I know you've liked Quinn as well. So what's going on with Quinn? Why is that at your 3?
Yeah, I mean, Especially what we saw in the first half of the season before injury,
Mhm.
Quinn was the best quarterback in this class in those first games. Obviously, you have to take everything into account. I'm not just living off that, but we saw, we know he has the arm strength. It's not the best in the class, but it is very, very good. We saw the top level placement, good talent around him, obviously, but played really well. Processing was up, leadership, command of the offense, everything we've been dying to see from Quinn was there. And then the injury happened.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's happened with his whole career since, obviously, not really being at Ohio State, besides just hanging out. So, and just
making a million.
Yeah, being roommates with Jack Sawyer. But, I like what I saw with processing. He does everything to me. He's a good off platform, throws with anticipation a lot of times. The thing we've been really checking a lot with him for a long time is just accuracy on the deep ball. I think that still needs to be there. But, I see good mechanics. The pocket awareness is usually pretty good. Decision making can struggle a lot of times, especially throughout the second half of the year. And then the playoffs, we kind of saw a bit more. But the running joke of the college football playoff was, okay, Quinn's going to get his one pick out of the way here, and we're going to move on with the game. It's always in a big moment too. It's a big overthrow with him way overthrowing a deep ball or something like that, or some across the middle. But it's just a lot of little things like that. But when it comes down to just him and his arm, his mechanics, and reading the field for the most part, I really like Quinn Ewers. Production wise, he really hits down in our board. I do give him a modifier for the injury history, but Christian loves Quinn, like you said, and he's slower for both of us. I just want to point out, Film Grady is our QB2, both of us.
He is, and I was going to mention that. So Quinn Ewers down at QB5 for me. It's mostly based on the production. It was a down year production wise. I think when you look at the whole body of work, and really, like Randy said, before the injury, the mechanics were tight. Like I think that's always been Quinn Ewers' problem with a lot of the accuracy issues is the feet are bad. The feet have been bad. Before the injury, they weren't. They were really good. He was marrying his feet to his eyes. He was going through progressions with, he was, I guess, just concerned about his mechanics. And then the injury happened, and it was like oblique, right? Or hip. It was something that when you torque, when you throw, it's not comfortable. And I don't think Quinn Ewers ever got healthy throughout this year. But that's a piece of this evaluation because Quinn Ewers has consistently been unhealthy. I think that's a problem. That said, it's really good when he's firing on, when he is really focused in on his mechanics. And honestly, in big games, I thought Quinn Ewers was awesome. The Ohio State game, we'll take that one and set it aside because that's a legendary defense, one of the better ones we've seen in the last few years. But even in that Georgia game, I think he had a touchdown and 2 picks. Like that was the best he's played all year. The Arizona State game, he played remarkably. So I think he's a big game player. I think that's going to be something that teams like. And I think that he is probably going to increase his stock as we get through the pre-draft process. He wasn't involved in the Senior Bowl this year. He could have been, but I think with them having such a long season, I think he maybe, I don't know if he got an invite. Does anyone know if Quinn Ewers got an invite to the Senior Bowl?
I thought he did. I
don't think he went. Yeah, I think he wanted to wait for that. I think what I read when I was looking at it, he wanted to go for the combine. Like that's like his.
So to me, that says I'm not healthy and I need to get healthy for the combine and show off my new mechanics, which to me, I don't know if you guys remember, but Jalen Hurts, we had mechanics issues with him at Oklahoma that final year. And he came to the combine and it was like, oh, shoot, like this kid is working. This kid is with a quarterback coach and he is working on his mechanics. If Quinn Ewers comes out and does that and we see like he's really, really focused in on that, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he's higher for me when the draft rolls around, is the way I'll put it.
I've always liked Quinn. Like I said, I could have flipped him with Jackson there. Before, when he started off the year, that Michigan game. So full disclosure, I'm a Michigan fan, so it was painful. But in that game, he looked like the best quarterback in the country, and he was dialed. And if we got that Quinn Ewers, he would be the number one overall pick in college in the draft this year. Like that's the Quinn Ewers when you see it is like, oh my gosh, that's the ceiling right there. 24 for 36, just nail it. And that defense was legitimate. Like look at what they did down the stretch of that year too. Maybe at the beginning of the year they were suspect, but that defensive line, he made great decisions. I think the biggest question mark I have with Quinn is that like his decision making, yes. I don't know how well he reads defenses at times. Like, how many times did we see Sark on the sidelines? He makes a dumb throw, just a turnover worthy play or something. And Sark's like, they were in freaking zone. And you can read his lips when he says that. And Quinn just throws it as if they're a man, right? Like, and we've seen that there. And I think that's the area of like his game I probably am most concerned about with Quinn. It's like, hey, how well, and we can't dictate that. Like we can say what we want here on the show and we watch these guys and do this stuff, but we don't know what that means. Like we don't know if he can't do it. We don't know if that's the real reason. It's between the head or the eyes, like that kind of narrative. But even against that Arizona State game that he played, Sam Leavitt was talking all kinds of shit, saying he was the best quarterback in that game. I'm the guy. Quinn came out and had over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and a dime. That 4th down and 13 touchdown that he had there. Like that to me is like the good Quinn, right? That's the stuff that you're like, hey, that if that kid shows up, that could be it. And maybe if he doesn't go first round, which I wouldn't imagine he is, maybe that takes the pressure off him a little bit too. Or if he goes round 2 to a team that needs a quarterback and they look at it like, hey, we're just going to develop you. We'll sit you behind this veteran. Maybe like, I don't know, wherever Russell goes or one of these veteran guys goes, maybe Darnold and sits for a couple of years or whatever the case may be. I think it could be fun. And I think like that could be hey, Quinn Ewers has a chance. Like I like the idea of Quinn Ewers being a starting quarterback in the league. We've seen some bad starting quarterbacks in this league for a long time. Like we still saw him last year. Quinn could be that. Like I'm not throwing dirt on Quinn Ewers at all. I would 100% draft Quinn Ewers over Jalen Milroe. That I think from an NFL GM perspective, I understand Milroe's upside from a rushing standpoint, but Quinn Ewers is a way better passer.
Yeah, I also I think Quinn, out of all of these guys that were that are not going to be starting day one, I think he has like the easiest path to be in the next Jordan Love of just sitting and absolutely excelling once he's in.
And there's a plethora of teams that need that at the top of the second round and even as you get a little further in the draft. But like if Cleveland passes on a quarterback and doesn't really get one in free agency or even goes and gets a Kirk Cousins or something, I mean, 33, we could see Quinn Ewers come off the board and then it's like, oh, shoot, we're putting Quinn Ewers with Kevin Stefanski where he's doing the Sark and he's telling him, hey, just throw the freaking ball here. It's going to be wide open. Like that's exciting. So I totally get it. And I think if I were a GM, I'd probably draft Ewers over Milroe, despite how the grades come out for me. Just, I think there's more to work with Ewers, I think, than with Milroe.
He's been in my head locked to the Rams for months now.
Mm-hmm. In the first or in the second?
No. Second, day 2.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind that spot for him. I really wouldn't. Like if he goes to those locations there, I just can't get out of my head either. I don't know what it is about Quinn. Maybe it's just because I can see his talent and we've watched him play for a long time that he could step in. And if he gets that good Quinn Ewers going. But again, you go back to it. He's got to stay healthy. Man, he has just not done that. And you don't want to say injury prone because I know that's not a real thing. And all those weird injury fantasy doctors are going to yell at me. But what I would say is like, you got to stay on the field. Like if you're going to develop, you're going to have to do that. All right, let's talk Jackson Dart. So he's at my 3 and Christian's 3. He's at 4 for Randy. And then we'll get into the top 2 guys, which is pretty much consensus at this point. Although some people think Dart should be QB2. We've been hearing a lot of noise about that. Some said he had the greatest Senior Bowl ever. And then other people are like, I don't know what those dudes are watching because he did not have a great Senior Bowl, which is just that's just perfect because that exactly just emphasizes what the Senior Bowl is for quarterbacks there. But Dart, if you didn't understand where he came from, he was a transfer from USC, went to Ole Miss, and he's looked good at Ole Miss. Like, he has had a very solid production there. They won 10 games in a row, 2 years in a row, or 10 games for 2 seasons in a row, and really kind of developed Ole Miss there. Well, Christian, what do we say about Jackson Dart? Where are we at with him?
I mean, I just want to throw it out there that there's something in the archives that we liked him about 4 years ago,
Yeah, we did.
and at USC, and part of the reason was the buttoned up mechanics were always there. He's always had super buttoned up mechanics. This year, I think we saw a step forward, but also this Ole Miss offense pisses me off. I hate evaluating quarterbacks coming out of it. Matt Corral. I remember when Matt Corral was going to be the first overall pick that year because he was super productive in this offense, and I think there were times where Jackson Dart was able to actually learn things that will be applicable to the NFL. But there was most of the time where it was just a one read, it's open, or just a lot of trickery, a lot of weird stuff in Lane's offense. That's a lot of the development this year was with off platform work. I think he got better as the year went on. I think he certainly loses some velocity when he's on the run. Everyone does for the most part. There's not everyone's Josh Allen, but I think his off platform work was better. I think the mechanics were good. I think the two main concerns that I have: pocket awareness and anticipation. You don't see anticipatory throws in this offense, and the pocket awareness, that dude just loves taking sacks. And ironically, that was also the thing that made me love him at USC was he could, in the face of pressure, he was throwing dots as a freshman. I think some of that just got lost at Ole Miss in that offense. I'm curious to see if he can continue that trend forward. But people are talking like Jackson Dart's going to be a top 10 pick now, and I just think that that'd be a little bit rich for me. But there's a lot to work with. He's a younger prospect compared to some of the other guys in this class. I think there are tools there. I think he's got a big arm. I think he's fairly accurate, and his deep ball is one of the best in the class. But I don't see a first round player here, personally.
Randy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo everything you said. I mean, he's a good athlete with a good arm. Throws the ball really well, places it everywhere you want it, off platforms, good, better than a lot of quarterbacks. Mechanically, he's above average. I don't think he's like great by any means, but he's still good. But like you said, I mean, decision making, even I gave him a pretty good grade because the decisions he's making in the offense is usually really good. But he basically gets, the pocket awareness, like you said, bad. Anticipation on throws, awful. But he gets like double dinged for me for processing because I haven't really seen him process. Like, if we're going to be honest, and again, like Christian said, we hate evaluating basically Ole Miss, I'll say. Wide receivers too, because they just throw them on 9 routes. But
running backs too.
Yeah,
the whole
it's
offense.
tough because it's an effective offense for college. It's the same thing we've said for a long time about Tennessee too with this coaching staff. It's so hard to properly evaluate these guys because we don't see Jackson Dart process because it's a one-read offense, throw, scramble, or run right then. It's less of a, Oregon's offense is a little bit more in tune than this. It's just because it's not quick read necessarily. It's your one read is a 9 route. If it's not there, let's see what the heck happens out there, Jackson. I do think he got better at that this year. I think going into this year, I think I'd probably have this as above or below a 5 grade because it was just almost fed up with it at that point of like, I literally can't see him do it because of this offense. So I think there is some tools there. And I think that's where I think all the hype is for Jackson Dart because he's got the good arm. He's a great athlete. And there's a lot to grow in that processing. And I think a lot of people are we haven't seen it, so he could probably do it. And I don't trust that, though.
I don't like evaluating that way.
A lot of success for Jackson Dart was Lane Kiffin. I think, and you hear that a lot. Like you're hearing that a ton right now. Like, oh, Lane's done a great job of coaching him up. Okay, well then what is Dart without Lane? And I think that's what we saw with Matt Corral, right? Matt Corral had some other issues off the field, and he had some other stuff going on there. And Dart doesn't seem like he has that. But if I'm drafting Jackson Dart in the first round, I'm gonna get fired. I'm leaning that way too. Like I just don't see it.
Unless it's Bo Nix going to Sean Payton. And because, I would kind of say a lot of the same things about Bo Nix, except I feel like more to work with, like Randy said, in that Oregon offense. And And I think there was more actual reading of the field ahead of time. But Bo Nix really had a good pre-draft process where he proved that he could do those things. We'll see if Jackson does, and maybe that's when we start to see him in all the first-round mocks. And it's like, okay, Jackson Dart's gonna go to whoever, but it has to be a team that has a Sean Payton level schemer, and I just don't know if we have that this year. I can't think of one.
I don't know. I think that's a good point. I think that, and I think I read somewhere too that when Bo Nix was working out with Sean Payton, like the 17th row, I think Sean Payton was like, "Oh, this is my guy," or something like that. I was listening to a podcast; they were talking about it. I don't know. Maybe a coach does have that with Jackson Dart, right? Maybe already that's why those teams that are saying he's their QB2 is because they've had a plan for him and that's where they're at. But I will tell you, bad teams usually don't have plans like that. They usually just kind of rolling it. Oh, I don't want to get fired. I'm gonna take a quarterback here. I like Jackson Dart. I've liked him for 4 years. Like Christian said, you can pull up the tapes there. I just don't see him as being a starter. I just don't see him being a first-round buzz, being QB2. I think QB2 and 1 are pretty much what they are. So let's get into that too. At 2, I have Cam Ward. These two guys have Shedeur Sanders. And then at 1, I have Shedeur. And then these two guys have Cam Ward. We'll start with just, they outranked me on the Cam Ward talk. So we'll start with Cam Ward and why he's a QB1. Then I'll jump over and talk about Shedeur. But we'll have a good conversations about these two here. I know from all the talks of the Senior Bowl, kind of the offseason stuff right now, it seems like Cam for a lot of people is their QB1. Like they're talking about the Titans are going to draft Cam Ward. That's kind of where they're going to lean there. Do you agree with that assessment, Randy? You think that's where they're going? Is that why Cam's sitting there at 1 for you?
Yeah, well, I don't think that's why. I think they're a bit interchangeable. I have Cam Ward as like the clear 1, not like a big chasm or even a tier break, but he is graded as a better quarterback for me. The arm strength kind of really separates him from a lot of people. The guy's pretty crazy out there, a phenomenal athlete, throws with such touch and placement. I think we saw a lot of good command of the offense and processing this year. I think it speaks volume. Maybe the film grade, and then you go into more of what you've heard, what you've seen elsewhere, and him showing up on campus and basically only throwing to the other weapons of the offense besides Restrepo and just telling Restrepo, like, I got you. I know you're good. I got to work with everyone else. So like that's a guy that I could tell is going to be prepared and do the work at the next level. And I think that's what's going to separate him from a lot of teams. I think that's what makes him a Titans guy. I think the arm strength, I think the processing, throwing off platform, throwing with decent anticipation, some solid mechanics. I think that's where he's going to thrive for them. I think coaching-wise, they definitely have to work on his decision-making. Again, we saw a lot of fun plays from him this year and a lot of plays where it seemed like he wasn't even trying. Just throwing flat-footed, barely being out there, and still throwing for ungodly stats because it doesn't matter because the kid is just crazy. But I do think there's so much left to be desired in the decision-making. So I think a little bit more coaching in a pass-heavy offense with a coach that is coaching probably the most prolific passer right now in the league before this. I think it's a good marriage. I think Cam Ward will succeed for the Titans. And that's why I think he's going 1 for everyone. I think he's going to kill it on the draft interviews. I think he's going to do great in board work. I just think there's times where in game we see a lot of I'll just try and make it work, or at times it was almost like, let me see if I can, or let's have some fun here. And that stuff's got to go away.
Yeah. I'm just going to read what I wrote in my top 50 big board, and then I'll leave it at that. Ward was a confounding watch at times in 2024 with periods of elite play intermixed with baffling decisions. Regarding upside, Ward is the best option at the quarterback position. His arm talent pops off the film with the changing of arm angles, exceptional zip, and jaw-dropping accuracy on challenging throws. Mechanically, he's slightly inconsistent with his feet, that can get off kilter in the face of pressure. Still, he drives the football with the flick of his wrist, so it's less of a concern than it would be for someone with a weaker arm. His processing ability improved in 2024, especially pre-snap. Ward's freedom to get Miami's offense into the right situation and his correctness in critical moments were impressive. Ward's leadership skills are generating buzz in the scouting community, and it's not unreasonable to believe he'll be selected as the top overall pick when the draft arrives. I just think the leadership stuff is going to be a very critical separator between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and it's something we've talked about with Shedeur Sanders quite a bit. That said, I don't know what's real and what's not with Shedeur. I do feel like I know what's real with Cam Ward, and maybe that's what separates the two for me, because I do have a pretty big tier break between the two. I have Cam as a quality NFL starter, and I have Shedeur Sanders outside of my top 50. I have him as an NFL starter, which is fine. I think he can be a good quarterback, and we'll talk about him in a second. But I think Cam Ward is clearly the number one for me.
Yeah, in fairness, I have those designations and the grades as well. It's just the point wise, it's not like
that's fair.
Like Cam Ward to Jackson Dart is over 8 points. Like that's a lot. I mean, we're talking over a round difference.
Yeah.
So I know I'm gonna be the outlier here, and I don't want anybody to think that I hate Cam Ward, because I love Cam Ward a lot. I was a touting Cam Ward before you guys even knew who he was a few years ago, out of Encarte Ward. So I do like him. I want to also preface this by saying I would take Hunter, Carter, Mason Graham, McMillan, and Will Johnson over all these guys at the quarterback position. So
I would take 22 players over Cam Ward for what it's worth.
So just outside the top 5 without need, right? I was thinking need, like if these guys need a quarterback, right? So
sure.
like, they're not getting past the Raiders regardless. So like, and the Giants and all that stuff. But here's I think we're being a little too hard on Shedeur. I think that the leadership stuff, I think at the beginning of the year, I was on that train too. I'm not on that train as much anymore. I think that he did show some more maturity kind of down the stretch. I think we have to realize like how much was on his shoulders though with his dad. That's a whole thing at Colorado. And like, I think he got a lot of hate, and I think that stuff can get to you as a college kid. Like, I think it gets to me on social media. Like, I got blocked today by somebody, right? Like, you just can't handle it. And then you're out there and you're like a national figure. Your dad is a superstar, right? Like, he was the original superstar out there, and your family's getting a ton of hate. I do think that you're going to come back at that. Like, I think you are going to kind of be upset about it. But over time, I thought he developed into a very, very solid decision maker at times, and off the field too. Like, I thought he became a better teammate. I absolutely love what he did at the Shrine Bowl. He didn't necessarily throw, but he went there so he could highlight all his receivers. They all went with him, and basically they got to go to that. And so part of me is like, yeah, just like kind of how Cam Ward did with Xavier Restrepo and said, hey, I know you're good, but I want to get these other guys involved. He still went there and kind of highlighted his guys. And to me, that gives me a plus on that mark. So just from like a maturity standpoint, I think he's gotten better, but he's still Deion's kid. So there's still going to be like, he still has some primetime stuff in him. And I don't know if he's graduated that yet, but I do think that his arm is good enough in a timing kind of based offense. If they get the ball out, knows where he's going, and get it to a weapon, like let's say Malik Neighbors, for example, I think he could be a very solid floor guy, right? I think Ward's ceiling is higher. Like, I think Ward could be like that guy that you're like, yeah, his ceiling is there. So I don't, they're very close. They're 1A, 1B for me. Like, I just had to put it there.
Ward might be scarier, and I'm saying that as someone who just said that he's significantly higher. My bets are always on the higher ceiling, and I do think you're right. I think Shedeur has a really fine floor. I think he's a fine. I've called him a game manager on this show quite a bit. I think that's good. I think the NFL needs more game managers instead of freaking Drew Locks, like we've mentioned. Like Drew Lock can't manage a game, which made him a really bad backup. I think Shedeur Sanders is the game manager. But go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I mean, I'll also say this. I think him not playing for his dad for the first time in his career is going to help him. I think that getting a new voice in there, and I think that he can place the ball at all the levels. Like, I don't know. I know his arm's not going to always be there at times, but I don't think it needs to be. We've seen plenty of guys in the NFL not have the best arm, and if they can place the ball, get the ball out, find their playmakers. And I love the fact, like, if Ward is going to go to the Titans, I don't mind Shedeur getting drafted by any of those other guys, right? Like, the Giants have Neighbors. Browns I don't know how much I love that. I don't know if they're going to lean there, but
They
I
got
mean,
Njoku.
yeah, like they got Njoku, they got Bowers at the Raiders, right? Like there's teams that I'm like, hey, he could really fit there, right? And I think I just keep going back to Ward. I like Ward, but that gunslinging stuff scares the hell out of me. That decision making stuff kind of scares me. And we've seen plenty of guys get out of the league with that. Like we've seen that happen to guys like Jameis Winston, for example. Like these players that kind of have that in them and can't pull it back a little bit. And I know we say like hopefully it gets out of him. He's been doing that since he played it in Carte Ward. Like I've watched that tape. I've seen it multiple times. Like, and he was throwing across his body 50 yards. He can do it. I've seen him do that too, but he hasn't developed. At Washington State, the biggest knock on him, even at Miami, couldn't win the big games. Like he always kind of had those big turnovers, those interceptions, or whatever happened. And I'm not going to sit here and say Shedeur won the big games because he didn't, so I'm not going down that way either. But he did turn around a Colorado program that before they got there, what'd they win? 2 games in 5 years or something like that, or 4 years? I forget what it was. They were downtrodden college program. So I'm leaning floor here with Shedeur because I think that he could be in the league longer. I honestly, truly believe that Shedeur can be a very starting, serviceable quarterback for longer than Cam Ward because I think Cam Ward can throw himself out of the league. That's kind of where I'm at with these guys. I still think he can be very good too. Like I have him at 1 and 2. I like both of them. They're fine. I just lean Shedeur because I'm a little less nervous about Shedeur. I know it's weird to say out loud, especially after this whole year, but I like his floor.
It's entirely fair. I really do like Shedeur. I do think we've made the argument many times on here of it's floor versus ceiling for these two. And again, I do think I want to see some better processing and some better anticipation from Shedeur, just because I have it a little bit lower. There are so many games where these guys are just wide open against such inferior competition. I just didn't love it. But what you could tell his dad is prime time. He's very well coached. The placement, like you guys have said, is ridiculous. Off platform, he plays pretty well. Mechanically, one of the more sound guys. Even pocket awareness. I do have it really high. I do think he drifts in the pocket. I don't think he's ever been able to trust a pocket. And I think that's the biggest problem with him a lot of the times. I think that affects decision making at times. But to me, my main thing is I do want to see some of the leadership stuff cleaned up in a new environment. I just want to see it done, is basically how I put it. And then, like you said, Cam Ward is a gunslinger with a gunslinger skill set. I think a lot of times we saw Shedeur be a gunslinger with a game manager skill set. So I can't have that. Like if you can't make every throw and just win because you can't play like Josh Allen and not be able to make that throw that he made to almost continue the game. Like Cam Ward can make that throw and play like that.
Yeah. He also had the Heisman, like I think that's part of, like, if you watch some of the throws, it's like, yeah, he threw it up to Travis. That's what his decision was. He's like, and good on him for knowing that Travis is going to win that. I think that's both a positive and a negative. I think from a mechanics and placement standpoint, he's the best quarterback in the class. I think from a placement perspective, I mean, downfield throws are basically handoffs as long as the timing is correct. And that's the thing. He does not have a big arm. The processing stuff, a lot, if you watch the film, a lot of it's like drag routes, underneath routes, stuff that is wide open because teams were so afraid of the speed of Colorado wide receivers. Because, I'm not huge on any of them, but like you have Travis Hunter and LaJohntay Wester out there as two. Jimmy Horn's really fast too. Like they had a very vertical offense, but Shedeur really cooked on the underneath stuff, which I think can work at the NFL level too. It's just, I think a lot of that stuff, we need to see him. I think there are some turn downs, and we haven't mentioned it, but the sacks are problematic for Shedeur. And part of the leadership question that I still have, I mean, we're a few months away from it now, but he threw his offensive line under the bus, and then he had to invite them to his next press conference. And I think you're right, Kevin. I think part of that is being, Primetime's son. But I also think that that's a product of just that's what he's been taught to do is kind of deflect blame. I see that a lot. So I'm curious how he's going to do in interviews. I'm curious what team will take the risk of having a bit of a circus. I mean, Tim Tebow went in the first round, and that was like the biggest circus I've ever seen. Johnny Manziel went in the first round. Shedeur Sanders is significantly better than both of those guys. So I do think Shedeur will end up a first round player. I don't have him graded that way, but I totally understand having him 1 and betting on the floor because that is safer. And I think that I think Kevin's right. I think Cam Ward could throw himself out of the NFL, and Shedeur Sanders will still be, posting 3,000 and 400-yard seasons with like 20 touchdowns and 6 picks or something like that. And it's like, that's good enough, I guess.
And I do think that Kev is completely correct with that. I think Cam Ward to the Titans is the best fit. I think he could fit with Malik Neighbors. I think he makes some big plays there. I think he could become the safety of the Raiders or whatever. But I'm pretty positive Shedeur can play with pretty much anyone. That's the big thing. Obviously, if you give him a god-tier weapon like Malik Neighbors or such a consistent, somewhat core, I would say, with Brock Bowers or in Jacoby Myers, like I think those are where he's going to be most successful. Titans got a lot of things they got to figure out in that room, and I think a mobile quarterback that's going to make big plays for you with a defense that can carry you a bit, I think is a good fit.
Yeah. Well, I'll wrap this up. I'll say I would be less high on Shedeur if he got drafted by the Titans, actually. Like, I don't actually love that fit. I think you're right about Cam Ward being the best fit there. And I don't know if do you guys know what the Ewing theory is? Bill Simmons talks about it. Like, if a team loses their best player and all of a sudden they start playing more as a team and they're better that way, I think Shedeur could have a Ewing theory type NFL career where he loses his dad, he loses his Travis Hunter, and I know it's going to sound crazy to say, but maybe he can actually play within a system finally and spread the ball around and get it to different pieces and listen to his coaches saying, hey, this is what the reads are. And maybe we'll see something different, right? I mean, he's been basically playing with those same guys his entire career, almost essentially throughout his college career. So almost like a reverse Ewing theory. Like, yeah, you lose all the guys around you, but now you're going to be better because we're going to teach you how to just be quarterback of this offense. And here's your reads. This is what you're looking at. This is your whole offense now. You don't have to throw it up to Hunter. Like, and I do think that they were trying to get Hunter the Heisman as well. They had that stat padding stuff going on a little bit. So that definitely was part of that too. So that's kind of where I'm at with Shedeur. I like them both, but that's my argument for Shedeur. And the other argument would be that, yes, his floor I like, but maybe we haven't seen the how high that floor could be with that. Well, like we said, the offensive line was bad. The hyper focus on Hunter, coaching staff, all of that. Like, remember, they fired his offensive coordinator after his first year at Colorado. Like, there's a little bit of like things going on there too. So maybe we just haven't seen how high that floor can be, and maybe we're not considering what the ceiling could be too.
Yeah, perhaps. This quarterback class sucks though, for what it's worth. I think if you look at the 6 quarterbacks last year, Cam Ward I think would slot in maybe ahead of Bo Nix for me, ahead of Bo Nix and Michael Penix actually. Shedeur Sanders would be right there. But right behind Michael Penix, but like that would be QB7, and then if Ward was included, that'd be QB8. So that's just kind of some context to this class, and then the other guys just like would not matter at all. So.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a good call there. But hey, we'll have some more time to argue about this. So this is our 2025 quarterback rankings here. We will be doing running backs next week. That class is. That class
is gonna
loaded.
suck, honestly.
I don't know how we're gonna. Yeah, that's not gonna be fun. But we'll try to make it as fun as possible for you guys out there. So let us know in the comments. What are your rankings? Who are your top 5? Who are your 2? Do you believe in Jackson Dart? We want to hear that here on YouTube, but also on the podcast. Leave us a review. Let us know where you're at with the quarterbacks too. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope we give you guys some insight here on these guys. We'll catch you guys on the next episode.